The so-called armies that you said were plaguing you are long gone. No match for the steel of a true Roman and all that. Gaul is calming down at last. It must be a relief for you. You won't find a rogue man-at-arms from here to the frontier. North and south, as I understand it. Not entirely. There are Romans who would defy us yet. Hispanian rebels. They are building for an attack in the south. With our men tied down in Africa, they will have ample chance to raid Iberia. They may even be in league with the Desert Kings. I suppose you say this simply to guilt me into helping you? Guilt? By your own claims, this is a problem of interest to you, is it not? Tug harder. These heartstrings will not break easily. Oh, I jest, of course. Yes, any deviant Roman is a bad Roman indeed. I happen to be in need of a fresh victory or two to bolster a few minor pieces of legislation, so I will help you. What is this legislation, if I may ask? You may ask, but you may not protest. I aim to stricten the laws on religion. You truly think that necessary? What I think is irrelevant. The will of the gods and the will of the people are as one, and as Magister I must serve them both well, of course. Let me put it this way, Emperor. Aside from you, all the Christians in this world are warlike barbarians who threaten to destroy us without relent. I would say I am hesitant to tar you with the same brush, but indeed you've tarred yourself with it beyond any need for my involvement. Hello there, and welcome back to Fields of Mars. Previously, we were betrayed by the Sassanids, but we finished off many of their armies in a big battle using Anicius the Younger, and went on to counterattack their only settlement using Septimus the Younger, and that proved very successful, so now they're on the brink of defeat. We also killed the last of the Angles over in Gaul, finishing up that little project. We concluded our war with Lazica when they effectively surrendered to us, so that makes our border up there nice and secure. We were tested back down on the front lines when Mazun attacked Septimus, but he was able to defeat them, and finally we started advancing into Armenia, taking a very nice walled city. Now we're going to be taking a look at this siege situation. We've got Spahan under siege by a couple of units, and we've only got a couple of units inside to defend. What I wanted to do was hire just one general to get a couple of mercenaries together and go over to break that siege, but I actually can't because we're out of Imperium. You can only have so many generals at once, and we've managed to reach the maximum, which I've actually never done before, so that's interesting. And while I was doing that, I noticed that Anicius needs to be put back into his army. He was wounded by agents previously, the second time that's happened to him. The question now is, what do I do with this army? One possible thing I could do is come over to the west, because we are facing a bit of pressure here. Paulus and his army isn't in the best situation right now. There are two armies that were besieging him, but have now switched over to besiege a smaller town. He could go after them, but his force is only at half strength, since it's been afflicted by disease for so long. So we're not in the ideal situation to counter this attack. I was just checking the options here. I can actually make it round to attack the force besieging the town so that the garrison will help me. I wasn't sure how to play that, so I ended up putting the decision off and instead coming over here. We can make this attack with Costa against Atropatene, where we've got a chance to basically finish this faction off. I ended up actually breaking this siege because I immediately realised we can actually attack the army outside the settlement to avoid having to face the enemy's walls. I didn't realise this was a walled settlement. So there we go, this is the battle. It's perfectly even, but we do have on our side those large onagers, so I'm going to be hoping for this fight to come up with a formation that will allow us to exploit them. It seemed simple at first. All I needed to do was sit there and wait for the enemy's reinforcements to come on their flank, and then I'd bombard them. But they throw a spanner in the works by coming onto the field kind of behind me, which I didn't expect. It wouldn't be a massive problem ordinarily, but because we have large onagers in the army which take a very long time to reposition, we really don't want to move from our current formation, so all I could just about bear was to run back 20 meters or so, and now it's going to take absolutely forever for our onagers to get back into position ready to fire. I also can't really rotate my formation for the same reason. However, by just moving back that tiny bit, I was hoping I'd be able to get away with this, because the enemy's reinforcement army doesn't attack the player like straight away, only if they're aggroed onto you by proximity will they. Instead, they usually run to the middle of the battlefield, which is what they're doing right now, and only one unit actually got aggroed into attacking. So in they come to attack my spears, and we'll be able to easily beat them back. The units in Attila, or in Total War in general after Empire, I think, are all individually scripted, which is why you get things like this where one unit will just attack you on its own, because the enemy side doesn't have an AI controlling the entire thing overall like a bot. It's just the units themselves are scripted to do things, so whenever certain conditions are met, they will just do those things, which is what causes pretty much every weird AI behavior, since no one's checking whether these things are a good idea. So here's another example of pretty much the exact same thing actually. Another unit of cav just came round to the back of the army to fight our Praetorians, a fight they will absolutely and completely lose in mere seconds, so we'll just leave that going. Other units are attacking the front of our line, also a bad idea because I was in stationary testudo, so we'll get a tiny bonus against cavalry, plus they're all light cavalry in this fight. This isn't a Sassanid army, this is just one of the lesser eastern states. They don't have all of the expensive units they can spam, they just have lots of regular cav which are easy enough to kill in melee, so no cataphract charges to worry about. Although, on the other hand, our units are worse than usual. These are no legionaries we're using, so the enemy's infantry will have an easier time. Managed to avoid getting flank attacked by some cav there thanks to some spears, and the enemy actually wisely not engaging in that case. And now, as the enemy army just starts blobbing up in front of us, we'll get those onagers to work and start dropping fire and explosives into those groups of enemies to kill tons of them very quickly. The one big problem we had was the enemy's archers. They've got those powerful Kurdish archers. They're currently targeting Costa, and they're actually going to kill pretty much all of his Praetorians in a matter of moments, because I didn't notice this at first, so that's going to be pretty deadly. But aside from that, everything else seems to be going to plan. As long as our front line can hold, we'll keep blowing the enemy apart.
Ah, damn these things. The point's dig into your armor. Come on, we're moving out of here. The boys know what they're doing. Lead the wounded here, come on. Don't think about any of that. Think about killing those runts who did it. Runts who did it, runts who did it. Kill them all, and their little hive is ours for the taking. No Magister to hold us back now. No Magister to say that we can't be trusted. We can do anything we want. The killing will not have to end on the battlefield. We can apply the punishment that Rome's ruling cowards do not dare begin. The extermination of these disease-ridden sewer beasts. I don't want a single one of them in my empire. I do want their money and women. So much work left to do.
As our bombardment continued, a bit of a problem began to arise because the enemy have actually broken through in the centre. One of our units started the battle pretty weak, and it goes down. Now the enemy start rushing into our back lines. An explosion kills some of them, but the rest of them will make it into our onager line. Fortunately, they focused on our smaller onager, which isn't so important. I did have one reserve unit that now rushes forwards to engage the enemy, and because those enemy units are kind of weak, there's pretty good hopes for just pushing them right back away, and our large onagers are, most importantly, still firing at things. On the left end of the line, we've got a similar problem that didn't actually go so badly, because while the enemy did also break through here, they didn't manage to engage our onagers, but for one guy who apparently didn't count as engaging it, so it didn't stop them from firing, so that was nice. To try and support on the left, I'm using my Martiarii to throw jabs into these blobs. That's going to do a decent amount of damage. The enemy's archers are starting to get drawn into melee, perhaps running out of ammo, so that's going to help us out as well. And here we get an absolutely gigantic fire started by my small onager. so that's going to kill tons of enemies. Very nice stuff. And of course the explosives going to do good work as well. So very quickly enemy numbers are going to dwindle. We're kind of clearing things up in the center now, making a counterattack and securing that part of the battlefield. The balance bar starting to go in our favour at last. Here comes some scout equites to try and hit the enemy's archers in the back. Only problem is it's the Kurdish archers who are a pretty decent melee unit, and Scout Equites aren't a very decent melee unit, so that is going to be a tiny bit of a struggle over there. We'll need to send something to support. First, we're focusing on this blob. The Onager right in front of it actually can't fire at this blob because it's too close. They do have a minimum range, so I'm going to rely on the other Onager to clear them out. Fortunately for us, things just kind of ended all of a sudden because the enemies chain routed at about this point, so that was very nice. It saved our Scout Equites from being defeated, and the battle ends in a close victory. So that was a little bit messy. That's what comes from using the inferior Western Roman Empire style troops rather than our reformed troops, I suppose. So here's the full results. We somehow avoided losing any units. I thought we did, but we've just got loads of really damaged units. And on the enemy side, tons of stuff lost. We'll take some replenishment after that, but barely any because of the replenishment mechanics being a bit weird. It's not based on the amount of enemies in the battle, it's based on the size of the first army, which means in situations like that where you just attack a couple of units to initiate a giant battle, your captive count is very low for whatever reason. So now we can besiege the town. I'm just going to auto-resolve this. This is super dangerous because auto-resolving while your army is damaged tends to just kill tons of your army because the auto-resolve doesn't really consider reserves to be a thing. We somehow only lost one unit there. I expected to lose a lot more, so that was welcome news. As for what we'll do with the settlement, it's going to go right down. Costa going to use his favourite option of just killing absolutely everyone. We don't want to occupy this place anyway, and that is certainly going to take Atropatene down a peg. Their faction wasn't destroyed, they still exist with 40 random mercenary javelineers or something, so they can still make a comeback from there in theory. Oh, it's slingers, as you can see there, and Costa's going to start moving south to help out with the other conflicts. Meanwhile, Varus is continuing his journey west. He's reaching Greece and Macedonia now, and I'm going to have him stop for a while in Skopje, where our legionary base is, because what I can do is not only rest his troops to try and shake off their disease and replenish his numbers, but I can upgrade the legionary base to finally unlock the last tier of troops. You can unlock Evocati legionaries and Praetorian legionaries, the troops that are superior to the ones we're using now. They're just really expensive, and this building is itself almost impossible to acquire. However, we're at the size now where it is reasonable for us to get one of them somewhere in the Empire. So I think I'm going to try and do that just for the sake of it. So now we're back to the question of what to do with Paulus. I'm still hesitant to attack these enemy armies because I feel like a better scenario might be on the horizon, especially because the enemy have shown previously that they are very willing to retreat for seemingly unknown reasons. They might just go away, so I'll sit here in a fort, possibly drawing the enemy to attack my fort rather than the settlement, but more likely than anything, just waiting for the situation to improve, and hopefully for our army to be undiseased so we can replenish it as well. I also need to come back to the decision of what to do with Anicius here, and I realised I could in theory help Paulus with Anicius by moving to the southeast, because Mazun, the guys attacking us up there, only have one settlement. It's on the end of the Arabian Peninsula here, so I could attack it. That would cause their armies to face attrition, and it might cause them to run out of money and have to disband troops, although probably not because of cheats. So I'm going to move slightly closer to it. I can't reach it right now. The one risk doing this is that Macran over to the east will bring armies to come and attack Anicius in his slightly weakened state and potentially put him in a dangerous situation. We have defeated them recently though, so it's not a huge risk. We know they are still rebuilding their armies. So I am just going to stand here for this turn and see what happens on that front. Now jumping back up to Barber, who is in Armenia. We saw him take the Armenian capital last time, just for no reason really. The opportunity just arose, so we're just going to do it. And we've got a similar thing here. We can take some more of Armenia by pushing to the east, where for some reason Macran had this settlement but with no garrison, and the garrison was half dead as well. So we'll just move in and take it, just because we can. Didn't really plan to take Armenia, but we're just doing it now. It's just sort of happening. And hopefully it won't rebel too much. We'll have to leave Barber here pretty much forever to control it. But there's not much else he needs to be doing at this point. We've got 2 of the 3 regions. The other one is controlled by one of the allied states that we created at TOSP. I think Costa created that more than once, in fact. So we can't unify the region right now without betraying an ally, but we'll just sit on it and see what happens. The upside to all this is that the map's looking much cleaner now. There's less border gore. Where the enemy are is a much more defined thing, and now we're getting some easy to manage front lines going.
We shall be waiting for some time. More men must be trained, in case the false magister decides to use force, or the Senate for that matter. We shall prepare men known to be loyal to Rome, and provide them with the best training and equipment possible in recognition of their value. No one weedy, and definitely no one with even one case of illness in their past. I want the very, very best. Once they are ready, we shall make it clear that the continuation of the magisterium can only be through he appointed by the last. Only me. Then there will be no way the scheming Senate can use Eutropius to sully the office and make Rome just as weak as it was before Constans came and saved us all.
Looks like we didn't arrive in time to stop that army from attacking Spahan, so we'll have to just do it with the 2 units inside. The enemy have recruited a load of mercenaries, so now it's not just Trash Pagan Band on the verge of death, making things a tiny bit more difficult, and the balance bar isn't looking particularly nice as we start this battle. So I've got my 2 units of Legio Comitatenses, one sitting on a barricade just back from the gates the enemy seem to be attacking. The other unit is going to be further forward to contest an attack on the walls. We're going to have our towers helping us out in this fight, although as things start they won't be of much use because they'll be shooting towards this siege tower, and these heavy siege towers are pretty much invulnerable to tower fire. You have to hit them with a lot of stuff to bring them down. One interesting thing to note is that no one's actually pushing these towers. They're just rolling downhill, I suppose, of their own accord with a few troops inside, so that's nice. But yes, we won't be able to stop them, so we just have to form up in front of them as they come towards the wall and then try and defeat the guys who come out. I'm going to go into stationary to studio here because we're actually absorbing some fire, and the wall is absorbing some fire, as we can see, from the enemy's missile units. They've got horse archers and javeliniers who we can drain the ammunition from to make things easier later on. So here come those pagan bands, just small groups entering the battle, but since morale is based on proportional losses rather than the size of the unit absolutely, that means we are still going to have to kill quite a few of them to get rid of these guys. Luckily, our Legio Comitatenses will outclass them in melee, plus our towers are helping us out. The thing is, I've positioned my unit in such a way that the enemy can capture the towers eventually. They have so few troops there that it really wasn't going to happen on any sort of time frame we needed to worry about. But they did start moving more and more stuff up, so it was starting to happen, and losing those towers would make us quite a lot weaker since they are going to inflict quite a lot of kills. And against small units they're very good, since they only have to shoot 5 or 6 times and they might actually rout the unit entirely. So I have high hopes for the tower remaining on our side, but it's not happening right now. At least we can still win these melees, even without the towers, since they don't have anything good coming over the wall. And things were accelerated actually on the tower front when the enemy started putting their cavalry into our gate. What happened is one of the enemy units routed, and that opens your own gates, in one of the Rome 2 classic annoyances that came over to Attila. And you can see the enemy cavalry kind of ran into the gate. They're not allowed to pass through it because they don't own it, but because part of the unit was sticking through, it captured the point really quickly. And then the towers collapse, they're allowed to go through the gates, and now our infantry are going to be swamped by all these cavalry. Lots of horse archers, so that's not too bad, but they do have some decent cavalry in there as well. So right now the battle is going to devolve into just a case of waiting to see what this unit can do. They just have to hold off everything. I could deploy my other unit, by the way, to help them, but I'm very determined to sit on my barricade to try and get some dart exploits going. So here we are a bit later. Our unit was defeated, unfortunately, by the enemy's cavalry, although we did a lot of damage back to them. And now the enemy are going to be mean to me. They didn't go and sit in front of my barricade like I wanted. Instead, they're going to do the more logical thing, that is just run through the city and capture the rest of it. At least that means my towers can keep firing at them in other parts of the town, and for these units that are almost dead, that's probably going to finish them off. The big issue is they could go and capture the central victory point and then just win the battle that way, so I needed to start moving my other unit back towards that point to defend it. The enemy sent some horse archers to slow us down, but it's not going to do much to us. I just quickly dropped into stationary testudo since you get a bonus against cavalry, and then that unit will be defeated pretty easily. They'll probably come back again because they weren't shattered, but we can always face them again. Now my other unit from the start of the battle did actually come back from routing, although it had been split up. Now loads of them are outside, and that caused a whole bunch of movement glitches, which essentially meant I couldn't do anything with them. They ended up just getting stuck in the corner of the map. Now the enemy's general is in position to take our victory point, but for whatever reason he didn't. He just sat next to it and seemed to wait for us to come and contest it with him. I think he decided he was defending the city now. So that was nice. Perhaps the AI is programmed to not capture the central point with the general, so the general just gets into position to defend the point, presuming it's already been captured, but in this case his men have apparently failed him. So we kill those horse archers again, and then we come over and throw volleys of darts up the hill towards that general. We don't want to charge in for a melee since this general is pretty good, and the darts are going to do all the work we need. We kill loads of them with the first volley, the second volley falls down, and that just routs them after they take a couple more losses, and that's going to be the end of that. The balance bar now fully in our favour. We have held off their invasion. Pretty nice. It's one of these cases where the small scale battles are Total War's secret. Everyone likes the epic battles, but the tiny ones where you have total control over what happens do feel a tiny bit more satisfying. How many troops would die if we marched another day? Not all of them, yes, you're right, but then what advantage does their death buy us? The chance to defend a lonely desert town filled to the brim with our mortal enemies. These men were entrusted to me, and I've already put them through enough. Let these Arabians rule their own kind, and kill their own kind. Besides, we've no orders to fight them. Perhaps Varus ordered us to hold this border, but Varus has ordered that we serve him as a pretender to Rome. Keeping this border intact will only serve to strengthen his conspiracy. If things become dangerous, he may see that he is the very evil he preaches against. So there are many reasons to stay put, and many lives staked on us doing exactly that. So we're going right into another settlement defense. This is the one where I didn't help with Paul, as you can see him standing in the background there. So now we're facing a very difficult fight indeed. I decided to actually give it a go, just because the enemy have some large onagers coming in as reinforcements, and I was pretty sure I'd be able to take them out whatever else happened, and that would make killing these armies in the future much easier. Now we can see here the enemy come in and capture the towers to start off. Nothing unusual there. However, what actually happened in the battle as I fought it was that the towers switched sides rather than being destroyed. I still don't know what causes that. It very occasionally happens in Attila that you can capture towers and use them for yourself rather than destroy them. And I bring that up because it's going to change how things go in this battle quite a lot. This replay is going to be very weird, so we're just going to look at a tiny bit of it. The relevant bit that does show what happened is mostly going to be focused out here, where the enemy's large onager and some slingers were sitting on the edge of the map, and I'm just focused on going to take them out with some cav. So here we are. I sent some scout equites first to attack the slingers so we could get them out of the way. I needed to kill them before I killed the onager because the slingers would be able to kill my cavalry while I was fighting the onager, and the onager itself is too slow to turn to actually fight my cav while they're stuck down in that melee with the slingers, so we just need to wait for them to clear that up. Apparently the settlement's on fire. Doesn't seem to be the case. I think this replay is already starting to go out the window. So now here we are, a tiny bit later. I've got some other cav taking out enemy archers next to the ruins of a tower. In reality, at this point, I was actually recapturing that tower to use it for myself, although I think the enemy then captured it back. So these towers were changing hands throughout the battle, and the actual fight part of the fight really had nothing to it. It was just blobs of men fighting each other around the main entrances towards the capture point, so there wasn't much to do there. Here you can see my cavalry starting to come back from their raid, and the enemy slingers are still alive, but in fact they had been killed by this point, and that's just another thing that's going to pretty much ruin this replay. Lots of enemy skirmishing units weren't killed early on where my cavalry just took them out. So what we ended up seeing in the replay was that one of the enemy blobs completely broke through our very weak lines and captured the point and rear attacked everything we had left, and the battle ended pretty quickly. But here is the actual live version where things lasted a lot longer, because we can see the towers, which haven't been destroyed even though they are captured by the enemy, are firing broadly towards the melee, and most of the stuff that they can potentially hit are the enemy's troops. So I think they were killing tons and tons of enemy infantry while these fights were lasting, and that's making them much easier. So you can see here, instead of the enemy breaking through, our lines are looking pretty strong, and the enemy have lost loads of men and their morale is starting to break. And I think it's just because of the enemy towers whittling units down, and of course because we took out their skirmishers, although I'm not sure those skirmishers were doing much throughout the fight because they never had line of sight. But anyway, we see units starting to rout away from the blob, and now I'm using my cav to go and chase them down, but being very careful to go around the edge of the range of the tower that the enemy owns, since my cav unit will be defeated very quickly if it gets attacked by a tower. So now we can do extra damage to the enemy no matter what the result is by killing those shattering units. Since that front got cleared up, I could bring the infantry around to rear attack the other enemy blob. That blob is getting to the point where it's going to break through to its front, but now this fight to the back will distract them and provide them with plenty of extra challenge. I'm using some out of ammunition archers to go and try to recapture one of the nearby towers. Not that I especially need to, since it's already shot so many enemy troops. It's effectively been on our side the entire time. So here I am trying to make that capture. That tower will shoot my archers, but at least it's not shooting at my legio, who themselves are going to have a good time hitting this low morale enemy blob. Stuff started shattering all over the place. Although the shatter did prevent me from attacking other units, because our guys get bogged down by the enemy trying to retreat through them. But still, you can see the balance bar has gone to be roughly equal, whereas before the enemy had pretty much the whole thing, so it's going well. And a tiny bit later, we actually saw some more shatters, and suddenly things were going our way. Just needed to press with my last couple of units against the enemy's last couple of units to try and finish them off. We just about got that tower capture in the end at the expense of loads of archers, but we didn't really need it. By the time we have it, the enemy have chain routed, and we actually won. It was strange how things went so differently, and I'm sure it was all just because of the weird unknown glitch where towers can be captured. I feel like it happened in the past at some point in this series, and someone in the comments might have explained how it works, but I can't remember what the explanation was, so feel free to do it again if you do know. For the rest of this fight, I just chased down enemies and killed them to make sure we did as much damage to these attackers as possible so we can finish them off easy later on. Here's the final result. We somehow won a Pyrrhic victory, but considering our losses were all garrison units, that's absolutely fine. Pretty much the best result we could have hoped for from that battle. Now Paulus, even with his men on the verge of death due to disease, should be able to finish the enemy off. Atropatene come back there by recolonizing their last settlement, so we'll have to finish them off again. That's a shame, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And now we get some very nice diplomacy. Spahan, the faction, rather than the town this time, want to be our puppet state, and we saw earlier behind one of those narrative scenes that the Armenians have also done this. It seems the minor factions at this stage see the Roman Empire as being so strong that they just want to be part of it. Even if we're not going to conquer them, they will submit to us and just do whatever we want. So that's a very good sign, although these other minor Roman states want us to fight for them. We're going to say no to that, of course. The political ambition of the Roman Senate hinged on the involvement of the remnants of the old empire. The Western Romans, still holding on to Iberia, had kept a great deal of their legitimacy in the eyes of Romans across the world. If their ruling classes were to ally with those of the new empire, then the power concentrated in the magisterium, theoretically still under veto power by the Senate, could be controlled. It was the only way to avoid a descent into despotism, they argued. Yet others argued that holding the main military authority to strict standards would hamper efforts to destroy the still very real threats to the empire from beyond the borders. But the actions of Eutropius, the official magister, seemed to indicate that the Senate's plan was working. That is it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and special thanks as always to all of the OfficiallyDevin patrons. Eutropius is going to go off on a little quest, and we'll have some more nails for the coffins of the Eastern powers in the next episode of Fields of Mars.